So hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today at the fourth Swarovski Foundation in Conversation Talk. This program addresses environmental, social, and human rights challenges faced by society and our world, which often are interconnected. Aligned to the Swarovski Foundation principles and with the contribution of excerpts from NGOs, the public and private sectors, and the creative industries, each session examines, discusses, and raises awareness around these themes. We come together today during Earth Month 2021, and this past year has the global pandemic certainly clarified our ultimate dependence on the physical environment. Today, I'm so delighted to welcome our guests, Kristine Tompkins and Johnathan Baillie. Kristine is the president and co-founder of Tompkins Conservation, an American conservationist, former CEO of Patagonia Inc., and the United Nations' first ever UN Environment Patron of Protected Areas. For nearly 13 years, she has committed her career to protecting and restoring wild beauty and biodiversity by creating national parks, restoring wildlife, inspiring activism, and fostering economic vitality as a result of conservation. Kristine is internationally renowned for expanding public protected areas and engaging the business community with the conservation of pristine mountains, grasslands, forests, and wetlands in Chile and in Argentina. We'll hear more about everything, and I'm so excited to have you, Kristine. It's such
nice to be here.
honor,
Thank you.
a role model, a hero for me. So to have you here is just fantastic. And I know you're a good friend of Johnathan's. Johnathan, we're so excited to have you here. Johnathan is the president of Natural State, an organization that leverages technology to achieve large-scale nature protection and restoration. He was formerly executive vice president and chief scientist of the National Geographic Society. He directed conservation programs at the Zoological Society in London for over 20 years and has authored several key publications on the status and trends of the world's species and systems. Johnathan has been visiting professor at Oxford University on conservation and biology, zoology since 2009. Johnathan was instrumental in developing the Living Planet Index, sampled Red List Index, and the Wildlife Picture Index. And finally, I have to say, I am extremely honored that Johnathan Baillie is a trustee of the Swarovski Foundation. We've learned so much from you. It's been such a privilege to just be exposed to your information, your knowledge, your passion for nature and conservation. And
it's my honor to be part of such an amazing foundation. Thank you, Nadja.
It's, and you together with all the trustees, you are incredibly knowledgeable. You're so smart. You're so kind. And it is that passion and that kindness, I think, that just really fuels that fire and will help make that positive impact on the world. So the dedication to the natural world and the people the earth depends on remains central to our ethos at the Swarovski Foundation, and it's a value we share deeply with both of you. We've seen in this arena, the NGO arena, that cooperation is the only way to address challenges that transcend borders. And today we will explore the urgency of protecting our planet, nature, and its diverse and beautiful ecosystems, communities, and species. So this conversation here with all you visitors aims to illustrate the importance of nature conservation as a resource for change and to share guidance for individuals and societies to make a better choice for the future. So, both of you are so amazing. I just really wanted to give you the opportunity, actually, before we dive into some questions, really talk about your backgrounds. And I'd love to start with Kristine, how you have moved from a corporation to the nature conservation. I know it's also a B corporation, which is very rare and impactful, and quite frankly, a really super role model for companies and corporations to lead. Commerce never has to interfere with environmental sustainability. But in any case, no, it would be amazing just to hear from you, your beginnings and how everything evolved in your career to how you came to today.
Well, thank you for inviting me to join you today, first of all. And I'll say briefly, my siblings and I grew up on our great-grandfather's ranch here in California, where I am since the pandemic began. And so we grew up outside, and we weren't thinking about conservation in those days. This was in the 50s. So, but our relationship with the out of doors started when we began to walk. When I was in my teens, I met Yvon Chouinard, who is a climber and started making technical rock and ice climbing equipment, and then decided to start making clothes for climbers and so on. And I started working for him before Patagonia was ever conceived. And so a couple years into it, we started this clothing company, and I was there for 24 years. I ran the company for many of those years. And then when I hit 40, I began to think, I could be doing this until I'm 70, which is what I am now. And I wanted to do something else with my life, though I had no idea what. But my soon-to-be husband, Doug Tompkins, who was the founder of the North Face and then sold that, and with his former wife, Susie, created the Esprit Company. He also, at this point in 1990, felt he needed to do something else with his life, and he wanted to spend the last third of his life figuring out some way he participates in the protection of these places that he's loved. Anyway, the long and short of it was, I retired on a Friday in 1993 and moved to South Chile a couple days later, and we've been down there for 28 years, acquiring land and turning them back to Argentina and Chile in the form of national parks, donating them back. And as you mentioned in the introduction, starting to understand who's missing wherever we're working and bring back the keystone species, which has become at least half of our work. And we're involved in all sorts of things, but that's probably the work that we're most well known for. But we have had cattle ranches and farms, figuring out how do you change the paradigm about ranching and food production as well. So anyway, here I am. We're still doing it. We have great teams in Chile and Argentina, and now one in the US. And I want to do this work until I simply physically cannot do it any longer, because I feel very grateful to be working with people like Johnathan and all the people you come in contact once you start rolling in a new direction. So we were really refugees coming out of the business world, and put those skills, what we learn in business, and really apply it to something else.
Amazing. And how did you choose Argentina and Chile?
Oh, Doug was a ski racer, and of course there's a lot of training down there in the off season. So he was down training for a few years in a row, and of course penniless. He would hitchhike around Chile and Argentina and got to know it really well. So when the time came for him to think about what part of the world he could really imagine himself leaving San Francisco and rebuilding his life, the Southern Cone became a real possibility. And it's always a question mark how you end up where you end up, and there are a lot of factors, but we have had, I think, an impact on conservation in other areas, but certainly our concentration has been down there.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And Johnathan, it's so wonderful to see you here now. Your background has changed. The last few times we have spoken via Zoom, we had a beautiful baobab tree from Kenya in your background. You were in Kenya for 4 months, I think. But it would be super just to for you to share just your story and how you have come to the point where you are today.
I guess I've always had a slight obsession with the natural world, and I actually started out in investment banking and realized quite quickly that wasn't my calling, and went on to do a master's at Yale. And from there, I got the opportunity to do an internship at the World Conservation Union. And I got to work with Simon Stewart and Georgina Mason. My intern job was to pull together a thing called the Red List, and it's a list of the world's threatened species, and to use a whole new way of classifying whether species are threatened or not. So it's kind of a way of looking at sort of what Chris was talking about in terms of what's missing or what's highly threatened. And I came to understand that there's just thousands and thousands of species that are on the verge of extinction that we know, almost nothing about. And then from there, I went on to do my PhD on a similar topic, and then went into the rainforest to study gorillas. And there, the idea was to try and think about how we could sustainably manage a massive protected area by creating ecotourism for the gorillas and research as well. And that went really well until Ebola came into the region and presented some challenges. But as I was wandering through the rainforest, I was thinking, what could I do that would really change the way that people think about the natural world, or what's the biggest impact I could make personally? And I thought, well, I really liked the Red List work I was doing. How about I try and define the status and trends of the world's biodiversity? So I came back to the Zoological Society of London and started an indicators and assessments unit, and there worked on the Red List Index and all those things you mentioned. And they showed things like 68% of the world's vertebrate populations have declined since 1970. So that's like basically since I was born. And that's not just sort of threatened species. That's like vertebrate populations. That's birds, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, and fish. And so we'd put out these big reports, and the whole world would say, well, that's just terrible. And then all of a sudden it would die away. And I realized, well, we need to do more than just sort of communicate the status. So I thought, okay, I'm going to think about scalable solutions. So I worked for the conservation side of the Zoological Society of London. They do, we built out a big program in 50 different countries and trialed things that we thought we could take to scale. So one was actually launched just a few weeks ago called the Rhino Impact Bond, but we did things like some of the first RED projects, or use technology to hold oil palm companies accountable to show, where they were inside and outside their boundaries and so on. Develop some of the first technology for anti-poaching, or for monitoring, or for public engagement. And that was really fun. But then I thought, okay, this is really about values, and I could do all the work in the world and develop all these scalable projects, but if the world doesn't care about this, I don't see us getting too far. And then there was opportunity at National Geographic, and there was a combination of the science and the communication. And I had the opportunity to work with Chris there, and together we pulled together a group of the world's leading large landscape scale conservationists, and it really can't be understated how important it is to show that it is possible, and that we are succeeding, and that not everything is taking a step back, but actually we're taking a step forward. And Chris, for example, is just telling me she's released three more jaguars into Ibera, and is these types of things that give us all hope. And we together worked on a campaign as well to protect 30% of the planet by 2030, and basically most of the worlds have agreed to this. It's been adopted in the framework for this big thing called the Convention on Biodiversity. And it's those contributions that I think will really help raise the ambition globally of what we need to do to protect the planet. And then from there, I'm now just working on how do we actually get this restoration business to scale, and how do we support people like Chris and develop the technology and so on to really take this to the next level, because there are these amazing individual examples, but if we want to restore an area the size of the United States by 2050, we need to actually get in gear. And despite these big commitments that are being made right now, there's not really, other than a small handful of amazing examples, there's not, there's sort of a need for greater effort and more people involved.
Well said, Johnathan.
What's interesting, Johnathan, what you mentioned earlier is that you were in investment banking and you soon realized that it wasn't for you. And can you just talk about that a little bit? How did you realize it wasn't for you? And how did you realize then what else was for you? And that other else, did that already resonate with you as a child, or?
Yeah, I think I was always obsessed with nature, and my father was a big bird watcher, though he was a banker, or is a banker, and so there was some pressure in the family to work in the bank, and if I didn't get a summer job, I might have to work in the bank. So I always had a summer job working on ranches or doing something interesting. But I kind of felt it's something I had to try, and so I came out of university, and I actually found it interesting because in some ways in the academic world, or the conservation world, it's often hard to define success, whereas in the business world, it was pretty clear as to whether you succeeded or not. And some of those elements were refreshing, and I learned some things, but ultimately I looked at the people around me and I thought, is this really what I want to be like in 20 years? And is this the achievement I want to make? And I just thought my path would be different. Not to say that many of those people who choose that path can't have a massive contribute to the natural world, and many of them are supporting conservation at a massive scale. I just thought that I would get immersed and try and get involved myself.
Great. No, I just think it's really important. I mean, as we were saying, there's so much knowledge out there, the technology is out there, the education is out there, information, communication, but how is the human's commitment? And I think I just have to address that topic, because I can't help but think that more people than we think are actually interested or drawn to the environment. And yes, it is a certain paradigm or stigma to go into the financial world or find a job that brings finances, So, and that's why both of you are so interesting, because you're buying. It's amazing what you've done, again, back to your corporation. And I think that could just be such a good example of companies also to propel forward, to hit both elements, financial success while also conservation, but how can we also encourage that younger generation to truly follow? I mean, both of you are so lucky, you have followed your heart and your passion, and you must be such strong individuals to feel the freedom to have done so. So how can we propel, again, the next generation to find the truth of their heart, hear their heart and find the truth and get that education?
I'm not sure that it's strength or desperation that propels us along. I do think in terms of the corporate world and how quickly it is trying to shift around to accommodate not just economic growth, which is basically what we've been after for the last 200 years, to also see that their destiny as a corporation is deeply thwarted if they don't start looking at these responsibilities in parallel, both from economic and obviously profitability, but also they have to begin to play the long game, which is like your family business. This is a generational business. And if you don't make an effort, if you can't imagine your company being there 10 generations from now, or if you can imagine it being there for 10 generations, then you have no choice but to run the company well. But the definition of the definition of progress will shift, and it will shift not voluntarily. I think it's going to shift by necessity. And I think, as Jared Diamond said, as he's written so much about the collapse of civilizations, that by and large, culture always trumps common sense. So we humans don't really change the nature of our daily lives unless we're forced to. But now we see, whether it's through the eyes of a pandemic and obviously climate change and so on and so forth, we have no choice now. And so the question is, what corporations will move fastest first? Because as it begins to crack open, then it becomes the obvious. And that happens in our personal lives as well. And you see it with Greta Thunberg and these young kids who are out in the streets around the world every Friday. That is cracking the paradigm of what even the extent to which you think kids can be activists, and they are really thinking about their future. So things are beginning to change, but as you said, the speed at which they're changing is not nearly fast enough. But by necessity, anyone who wants to be in business even 50 years from now, and I don't care if it's the financial markets, wherever it is, you really now have no choice. If you think of President Biden talking about his charge on climate change and renewable energy, so that's one thing if he says it. But then General Motors came out the following morning and said by 2035 they're going to be out of the combustion engine business. So these are tectonic shifts that I think are really beginning to fall into place.
Exactly. And I have to say, I believe in the species, the human, and the intelligence, to come up with the solutions required to better the world, better the environment, better commerce, production, and so on.
I think we are the master of our own fate as humans, and the fate of many other species as well. So we can and we must. That's all.
And I think all the trends are showing that the next generation, the expectation is that companies will take responsibility and will make positive steps for the environment and will be sustainable and so on. And then there's another trend which is happening, is this massive sort of radical transparency, which has like some scary elements to it. But when I talk, I referred to this sort of spot program we developed where oil palm companies all of a sudden could be seen where they were on a map, and you could see if they were cutting too close to rivers or if they were burning where they shouldn't be. And when we asked them for their shape files of their, where they worked, they were happy to give them to us because they didn't know we could map it. It was sort of earlier in the phase. And then when they found out that we could, all of a sudden there was some legislation going through that they didn't have to make this information available and so on. But eventually it kind of turned out right. But these groups have been able to basically mine the earth without any repercussion or anybody being able to see it. And by the minute, we're having greater transparency in terms of what every company is doing for the environment or not doing for the environment. And with a generation that truly cares, I think it's it's a very positive combination.
It's really true, Johnathan, because we're all watching Global Fishing Watch now because we're involved in marine conservation. And now even I can get on there and I can see where industrial fishing is taking place, and you can hit on a dot and you actually know, are they from Portugal or China? And the monitoring capability for good and bad behavior is, as you say, it's really changing. It's very hard to hide now.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, it is good. I think you're right. I think that pressure, public and private pressure, is essential. I mean, it is to all of us if we're misbehaving.
Absolutely. It's, knowing that you're under the spotlight or under
Exactly. Exactly.
Good. I mean, it's a conscious, if if you don't have that spiritual connection or the drive or
Mm,
in the first place, then at least let it be the consciousness
I think you're,
regulation that watches you and
mm.
impacts better behavior, positive behavior.
And I think knowing that children are out there evaluating you, I think this is remarkable.
Yeah.
I mean, we have family members here who, they're ready to pull the trigger on you if you don't compost your banana peels. They're very adamant, which is great.
I think that the notion we were talking about, Kristine, of in the past in Europe and certainly in England, children are to be seen and not to be heard is just non-existent. It's just amazing. I can just vouch for myself how much I've learned from my children, how much they tell me, how much information they already have about these elements. And I'm an easy learner. My parents, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But they
I know. Well, smoking in America, that egg was finally cracked because children were hammering away at their parents to stop smoking. Don't smoke around us, don't smoke in the house, don't smoke in the car. And people were running out of places to smoke. They were thrown out of the office environment and pubs, and it started with kids. And that's something that really did start with kids. So
I think that's great. They're very good. That new generation seems very enlightened. But then on that note, Kristine, can you tell us a little bit more how about your role within the UN and
yes. The UN, even though it's a behemoth, it's an enormous institution, it is broken down in areas where they really are focused on very important, I would say even essential areas, certainly on the environmental and conservation side. And they knew a lot about our work and asked if I would become this patron for global protected areas, which I was delighted to do because I think it accesses the kind of experiences that we've had. We've protected just something shy of 15 million acres and a lot of rewilding projects, only one of which has been delayed or downright unsuccessful. And I think the ability to work with the UN to talk about the issues that they want to get out there that support some of their other work, I am very happy to represent them. But also, they share our desire, Johnathan's desire, to establish the rewilding of species who've gone missing wherever we're working. And so I see it as a very equal and beneficial relationship. And anything we can do at whatever level to try to use our work as a model, both good and bad, the things that have been successful and things that didn't work, then that's what we're going to do. And I think that the UN is a really important place to be, especially now. So I take that role very seriously, and I think it's important.
No, this is, I mean, we're just, for Swarovski, the UN SDGs have been such a anchor and a guiding force. And obviously nature underpins the sustainable development goals in such a profound way. Forests are such a basis for water security, for buildings for people. Can you tell us a little bit how the rewilding you just mentioned is going to benefit the various people involved, both of you, Kristine and Johnathan? Just from your experience, it would be great just to hear about that.
Well, I've been talking a lot. Johnathan, do you want to start? And I'll follow.
Well, rewilding means different things to different people, and it's almost become an entire sort of philosophy of being. And people talk about rewilding their minds and rewilding their lives and rewilding the world around them, and realizing that we're not actually separate from nature, but we're part of it. And I think about it. I worked at the zoological.
So important. That is amazing. I have actually never heard that kind of terminology like that. I've heard people talking about resetting their lives, but rewilding,
Yeah. It is absolutely true. You have to start with rewilding your own mind, to putting yourself back as just one part of the circle of life. We sit in that circle along with everybody else, everything else. And I really agree.
Yeah.
And when I worked at the Zoological Society of London, you would see, some of the, it's evolved, but in the early days, some of sort of the Victorian style enclosures. And you would look at an animal, and they thought of an animal as separate from the environment that it lived in. And when you look at a tiger pacing back and forwards, it's not a tiger. The tiger is when it's living with its predators and its prey and the environment that it actually evolved in. That's a tiger, and humans are much the same. We need to be in a part of the natural world. And I think we're just coming to realize that. And we, over the last 200 years, we've been increasingly separating ourselves, and now it's about rewilding and coming back. So the first is just sort of realizing that that's sort of a movement, a sort of a way of being. And then in practice, it's a whole bunch of different things, from ensuring you have the conservation and restoration in place. But then rewilding is often specifically focused on bringing some of the animals back into the landscapes that have either been, removed from the environment or very low population densities. And there, Chris has had amazing successes, and we've both been celebrating the jaguars, but also the macaws that have recently been rewilded. And the greater success for what Chris has done in Ibarra is basically bringing that whole landscape back so that it can support these species that were removed. But the celebration of the individual species that come back that were removed, and it just creates an amazing feeling. It's optimistic. It's positive. It really helps the rewilding process all around. So I think Chris can speak much better to the the multiple success stories they've had in terms of bringing actual species back into the wild.
I think one of the things that has to be highlighted is that in almost every case, the local, community, regional, even national economic benefits of bringing back especially keystone species is real. It's you can calculate it, you can prove it. And I think many times the rewilding just gets stuck in the fact that the ecosystem itself will come back into its rightful place. But the impact on communities, the impact on regions, provinces, states is enormous, because in many cases, even rewilding the jaguars in a particular area where we work, a 2 million acre park that is created. The jaguars have been gone since the 1930s. So when we decided to try to bring them back, we imagined tremendous headwind, as you do if you're bringing back a large carnivore. And it turned out that in this province, in Corrientes, in Argentina, Correntinos see themselves, their self-image is that of a jaguar. So we had the opposite reaction that we were hoping for, and the provincial and national governments joined in, and people are coming to see jaguars now. Whether you see one or not, it turns out, is not actually that important. The fact is that people of the area and people from outside, we are all moved by the fact that they're there. And this happens with tigers in India. The economy, the tiger economy is growing so fast, and yet many of the people who go to see them, they'll never see them. So the impact, the social and cultural impact of rewilding, especially keystone species, is something we hadn't truly calculated in the beginning as we were getting going. But it changes our relationship with these places we think we know so well, with these people who think they know their territory so well. And to have jaguars back after 90 years, to have these macaw, the species of macaws back after 130 years, this is like an algae bloom of humans reconnecting to their rightful place in the circle of life. And it is phenomenal, and economically it's very beneficial for local communities. So it's part of reconnecting to the natural world, and as Johnathan said, rewilding ourselves first, and then help others rewild themselves and join in this world that we live in that is so much bigger than we think about day to day.
No, absolutely. I'm so sorry I have a wild dog here. So, but on that note, speaking about goal number 13, life on land. Johnathan, can you just reflect a little bit the situation about life with low water? Goal number 14, in particular, perhaps in reference on the coral reefs, which by 2050, or basically the UN's environmental program says by 2050, there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish. Can you just comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, you've got these big ambitious targets both on land and at sea, and I'm sure many of you have seen some of the new documentaries coming out that are sort of highlighting the issues in the ocean, which are extremely powerful. But you know, the coral systems are just extremely diverse, and they're not just beautiful. They basically are the nursery ground for many of the ocean species, and they represent a massive, disproportionate amount of the diversity of life in the oceans. And it's the combination of things like siltation that's going into the ocean and affecting them with warming in terms of the climate, but also the oceans are actually absorbing much of the CO2 that humans are producing. So each year we produce all this CO2, and some goes into the atmosphere and sort of warms up the planet, but a lot is absorbed, an increasing amount actually, by the ocean. But when this happens, it makes the water slightly acidic, and that makes the coral less resilient. And corals, you know, there's many different types of coral, but there's like a symbiotic relationship between this algae-like thing, zooxanthellae, and the coral itself. And when these become stressed due to this increased acidity, plus the warming, plus the siltation, plus the overfishing, plus the dynamiting or whatever else, these systems are under just great threat. So, I mean, this is an entire system equivalent to the rainforests on Earth that in our lifetime could actually disappear, with massive implications for fisheries globally, and also just our, you know, the diversity of life. It would be a massive extinction crisis, and it's actually happening, and we see it each year. And people get a bit overwhelmed, and it's kind of like, what can I do about it? And what we can do about it is do everything we can to address climate change, to try and protect these reefs as much as possible, to create large marine protected areas. So you have reduced overfishing, you have reduced siltation, and you can ensure that they have as a resilient environment as possible to deal with some of the inevitable changes that are going to happen anyway. And that's our best chance for maintaining these, you know, fundamental systems to the planet. And many of us have been fortunate to go down and dive and see this this other world that, is below the water. And many of us have a chance to show our children, but our children probably won't have a chance to show their children. And that's, that should really motivate us to put things into high gear.
And Johnathan, like, for example, people who can't go and look at those things, what, channels or videos or movies can you recommend people see in order to be inspired, or in order to learn and understand what's going on, what the status is now, what it is that we need to protect?
Well, there's on overfishing, the Seaspiracy just came out, and it's sort of on Netflix, and it's quite interesting, and it's told from sort of a, the hero in the documentary style film is a young guy and his girlfriend going out discovering the process of what's happening in the world. But in the process, you kind of get taken on the journey and learn about a lot of the issues. There's End of the Line. There's a whole bunch of really interesting films in the ocean space. But it's being increasingly documented, the coral reef bleaching and destruction each year, and it's like without a doubt happening. But I think that a big focus has to be also on understanding the importance of marine protected areas. And if you look at our global targets right now, we have targets of about 15% of protection on land, or 17%, and we're at about 15, and about we're probably about, well, it depends how you define it, but 10% of the ocean, but we're at probably, I don't know, 6 if you're being optimistic, and including areas that are being fished anyway. And then you build that out, and we really need to be, way above, 30 or higher of the ocean needs to be actually protected, both to maintain the fish and to maintain the coral systems. And we have to stop all this CO2 being sucked in and creating more of an acidic environment in the ocean.
And you're right, we have to do that, but how can we do that? How can we teach individuals? How can individuals' behaviors change in order to positively contribute to a change? What would your recommendation be?
Well, I mean, there's like the glaring issue that's going to affect all of us and our children, which is the climate issue. And we know exactly what to do. We know that we have to basically become carbon neutral, and we need to secure an area of land about the size, or restore an area of land about the size of the United States by 2050. And that will allow us to be in more of a stable climate going forward. Governments can easily stop things like deforestation. They just have to put the regulation policy in place and actually enforce it. And we need to have much, not just philanthropic and government funding going into efforts like the efforts that Chris is doing, but also getting more private sector funding into the system and provide the incentives to make that, a very valuable thing to achieve. But then individually, like we've all been taught, you can reduce, reuse, and recycle. But like every time you sit down and have a meal, you're making a decision about the planet. You can eat lower on the food chain and have a massive impact. Every time you buy something, you're having an impact. So can you get the sustainable thing? Every time you invest in a company, you're making an impact. So, choose the company that's responsible. Every time you vote, you're determining the policies and decisions that we made for the future. Every time you agree to a school syllabus, that's determining kind of what our children are going to be. Every time you talk about issues and talk about what you value with your friends, that influences what the broader community thinks about, the diversity of life and whether we should respect it. Those are all things you can do. And if all of us start to move in that direction, and realize that we are, nature is a part of us, and that we actually won't be fine mentally or intellectually if we don't have nature around us, or our children won't develop properly, then I think we'll start making some of the right decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kristine,
well, I think that's pretty hard to top, that description of what needs to take place. I would only add that I get asked a lot, by individuals and groups, well, what should we do? What should I do? And I think I really feel that I would echo what Johnathan has just said. We know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
We know, even as children, that there is a lot to be done, even if you don't know technically. But we, as individuals in our own living rooms, we have to decide that we're going to change the way we live. when you walk out the door, look around you. What is going on in your neighborhood, in your village, in your town? Because things are happening almost everywhere. And join in. I think the time for inaction is we're so far past that. So in a lot of ways, at a very individual level, as I always say, you have to get out of bed every day and decide that you're going to do something that has nothing to do with yourself. And that is a change in our behavior and our state of mind. It's participating on a playing field that is so much more beautiful, so much more important. And in the absence of action, then we have to remind ourselves that what we do every day is who we are. And so, I mean, I have to think about that all the time. I think we all do. What do we choose to do in the face of a healthy planet, in the face of understanding that all life has intrinsic value? And if we think that, then we have to behave like it. And this is hard for all of us because we swim in a cultural sea that is taking us in another direction, but we have to be proud of moving against that and toward a new and healthier direction.
It's amazing. No, I think it sounds incredible. I just hope everyone is at the same level of enlightenment, Kristine, as you are. And
well, no, I think, Johnathan, I think we are every day. I don't find myself enlightened. Again, as I said almost an hour ago, I find myself at my wit's end. I'm desperate because the natural world is so beautiful and is central to our well-being and it's fun. And the people you meet, the people you work with, the crazy things you become involved in that you could never have imagined. I was, just before we started the visit today, Johnathan sent me a picture of them moving giraffes one by one off an island that they may perish on. And these are the crazy things that you get involved in that change your life, and that can happen anywhere. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I'm all for it.
Yeah, great. Well, we will certainly try our best to communicate the ways forward and support the initiatives that are out there. And, I mean, for us, again, for the foundation, it's been amazing to be able to partner with great organizations and support them. Mm-hmm. And we're certainly aiming to educate as many people as possible about what the issues are in order to propel them to make that positive change.
Well, I salute you and your family and the company, because these are the things that everybody is watching. These are the things that begin to change the end of the story. And you and your family and your company are part of that. And that's extraordinary.
Oh, well, thank you. We try, we come from such a beautiful environment, the Tyrolean Alps,
right.
My forefathers always felt, they want to produce a product, but not want to impact the environment. So there was a lot of engineering that went into creating good filtration systems and, for the exhausts and water and so on. So, but we have a few questions from the audience. I guess for both of you, one person has written from a city. I live in a large city. How can I take part in rewilding? And what is it like on an urban level or in the context of city life?
Great question. Johnathan, do you want to start?
Sure. Well, I mean, London is one of the greenest cities in the world. And
really?
Yeah, and the Thames was one of the most polluted rivers in the world, and now it's one of the cleanest within a big city. or the cleanest within a massive commercial area. And there's the type of place that you have an opportunity to step out and get involved in rewilding. I mean, you can rewild your backyard, and you can work with local organizations to, rewild lots that have just been left abandoned, and provide a place for bees, or provide a place for a whole diversity of life that existing in the cities. And they're actually quite, there is quite a lot of diversity, and a lot of it is actually coming back and becoming more comfortable in cities. And we've seen even more of this during COVID, when there's less traffic and less activity. More and more species are kind of moving in and feeling pretty comfortable. So I think the thing to do is really focus on your ecosystem, your backyard, and then work with local communities to organizations to get involved with rewilding projects there. And then, on a broader level, support people like Chris that are doing massive scale rewilding. And those kind of efforts together add up to a lot.
I will say, if I don't come back as a cockroach and in my next life, I would really concentrate a lot on urban parks, because that's where the majority of people will come into contact with nature. And as Johnathan said, I would just echo this. There's Central Park, of course, but it's extraordinary what's happening in San Francisco and New York. The number of mammals that are coming back right into the center of the city. And if you don't have a set of binoculars, invest in a set of binoculars, head out to your parks or down your street. And when you hear something, seek it out, find out what it is, look it up in a book, learn about it. And all of a sudden, you hit a groove where you know who all of your neighbors are, rather than just the ones you think you know. And this is how it begins. So people in cities should support urban parks. If you don't have enough parks, this is a great activist role for people in urban settings, is go and seek out the support to create new green spaces for your city, because it's like opening a museum. Millions of people will come and they will have that experience and maybe get their own binoculars or their bird books. And this is how it starts. There's a lot to be done in an urban space.
How amazing. And certainly for the sense of community.
Absolutely.
Wonderful coming together and a wonderful sense of being able to contribute. Okay, I have another question. What are some positive educational resources for my children? And as they head to university with these interests, what do you suggest they study?
Johnathan, surely that's for you.
Well, I guess on the positive resources, when I was at National Geographic, we put together a whole series of it's called Exploring Conservation. It's a free online course that people can take, and they go through, how to set up an expedition, or what biodiversity is, or what role they could play in protecting species and ecosystems. So that's a great one. I'm also CEO of an organization called On the Edge, which is focusing on media and technology, and there's assets that people can download to learn about the world's most evolutionary distinct and globally endangered species. There's an increasing number of kind of online material for younger kids in terms of entertainment and nature, like Kratz creatures and that type of thing that people can download on YouTube, and their children can sort of learn and engage with at the same time, especially during this COVID time. Being able to kind of download this content that is both educational and entertaining is really important. At On the Edge, we've also done a number of motion capture animated characters that are fun and engaging, but also so you can talk to an AI basically, or a kakapo, and they're also talking about the environment and issues, and they have different things they care about and so on. And they're kind of virtual motion capture vloggers. things none of us would really understand, but something for the next generation for sure. But there's tons of amazing resources, and there's more and more not-for-profits popping up, which are basically pulling together resources. Like there's one called GEM, or another one called Water Bear, and others that have content that people can access.
That's amazing. So if you don't mind, both of you will just gather or collect your amazingly valuable information and share that on our platforms.
Good.
You know, just we'll really have the opportunity to go and look at everything.
Nadja, in terms of just careers, though, I would say I think it's a gift to your child to give them those binoculars and have them explore the natural world. But then I would support them in whatever strengths they feel they have and their dreams and ambitions, but make a respect for nature part of their, or ensure that that's part of their DNA, because we need solutions across every sector, from engineering to the financial sector to biology and synthetic biology and all these different areas. We just need the best, brightest people coming up with solutions that we're facing in the future. But that if everybody holds that in their DNA, we're going to come up with cross-sectoral things that work for everybody.
And can I just ask very quickly, are there specific universities that are more geared to kind of these environmentally focused studies? Or is that now going to be common practice at universities, that's really focus? Conservation.
There's more interdisciplinary work. For example, at Yale, the School of Management has a joint degree with the School of Forestry. So people are less siloed into certain areas, which is really, really important, because we don't need people who just understand it. Well, they're good, but we need ecology and other skills as well. And so that's just an increasing trend across the board. But universities like Duke and Yale and some of the California universities like Stanford and Imperial and Durham, all these are great areas for people to kind of pursue a career. And of course, being a visiting professor at Oxford, I have to say the Oxford program is particularly good. But yeah, if people are keen to pursue that career, then any of those universities would be great.
Fantastic. Well, I'm excited. I'm doing an ESG program at Oxford.
Okay.
I've been doing it at Swarovski for 10 years, but it's actually very different to hear it from a professor. So Johnathan, let's keep on talking.
Yeah, well, it's never too late to sign up for zoology. Yeah.
But next year. No, but what's amazing about this course is how legal it is. And it really talks about the new laws and regulations, and that also in the corporate world, that is so important. So I mean, I can definitely see a huge shift there. I think that's
there is
hopeful.
A lot of young people going into law, but through an environmental prism, and it's those are the sluggers you need in the next generation.
Because we have human rights. And actually, there should be environmental rights.
There is
those.
Interesting that you bring that up. There is a legal movement now to define nature's legal rights, and it doesn't actually exist. It exists in a very small way in a few countries, but by and large, nature does not have rights. And so some very, very well-known legal minds have taken this on to see how far they can get within the US legal structure. To start that rivers have a right to be clean, that jaguars have a right to exist in their original territories, and so on. So that's something that I think we're going to see a lot more of.
Amazing. Amazing evolution. Yes.
Yeah, it is.
Well, listen, thank you both so much. It was such a treat. It was so great to see you, at least this
Good to
way.
see
I
you
can't wait
too.
to see you in real live or in person. But thank you for your inspiration, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. And I hope everyone who's listening here will follow you. I'm sure they'll follow you and watch the progress of your work. But thank you. Thank you
Wow.
for your time and the insight. And
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
such an honor.
Thank
And
you.
Thank you for what you and your family are doing. I'll say it again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I have to say it's a privilege and an honor, and in a certain sense also our duty,
Mm.
So
Wow.
thank you so much. And it's really because of collaborators like you that keep us motivated and inspired.
Wow.
Thank you.
So
Thank you, Nadja.
long, Johnathan.
So
We'll
long,
talk
Chris.
soon.
Love
Yep.
the
Thank you, Nadja.
program.
Thanks for the
All the
for
best to
foundation.
everyone listening.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.